Hey, welcome to the annual Kentucky Derby Seminar, the Capital OTB Kentucky Derby Seminar. Seth, Merrow, Tim Wilkin, longtime area horse racing writer and analyst. Tim, good afternoon, good evening.
Seth, how are you? Normally I would be in Kentucky, but if I can't be in Kentucky, where else would I want to be than right here?
Next best thing.
Absolutely.
And I would just, before we get started, we're going to take a little look at the Oaks to start things off. Then we'll delve into a little more extensively the Kentucky Derby, and we'll hit on a couple of the undercard stakes on Saturday as well. But I'll just get an overview from you, because I think it seems like as the year progressed, I would say the first couple of months of the year, the three-year-old picture was not that strong. But as we got into that second set of kind of prep races, and you got into late February, March, and certainly April, the prep races really got strong, and I think the Derby is very good, and I think the Oaks is really good this year.
They're both really phenomenal betting races. The one thing about the Derby, I don't think you have the it horse, the horse that everyone thinks, this horse has everyone over a barrel. You don't have a Justify, you don't have a Pharaoh, even a California Chrome type, but you have a very, very contentious field. And you know, they say it every year, you can make a case for half the field. And I've said this before. This year, I really think you can make a case for half the field. It wouldn't surprise me if one of the 10 horses wins this. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a Mind That Bird or a Giacomo in this race, but who knows?
Yeah, well, and there might not be a Mind That Bird or Giacomo, but I think there might be a simplification at 20-1, and you wouldn't be shocked. I mean, the price just is kind of reflective of there's 20 horses and it's contentious. But a horse like that wins, it may be a surprise, but it wouldn't be shocking.
No, I mean, it's the prep season. You know, you didn't have, like a couple of years ago, it seemed like every prep race was an upset. You didn't have that this year. So that tells me that this is a very, very, very contentious group of three-year-olds going to go postward on Saturday, and you know, good luck handicapping it, because it's a tough one.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. Certainly Friday and Saturday, Oaks Day and Derby Day. And let's start things out by taking a quick look at the Oaks and give people a couple of ideas maybe on the Friday feature. It'll be the 11th race on Friday, the Kentucky Oaks Grade 1, $1.25 million up for grabs, as the three-year-old fillies will go 1.1 miles. Tim, how did you see the Oaks?
You know, before we get into the Oaks, we got to talk about the major player in this race, and that's the weatherman.
Yeah.
There's a real good chance that this could come up a sea of goo, because the last weather forecast I saw for Louisville on Friday has a 100% chance of rain. So take that into consideration and bet accordingly and plan accordingly. But as far as me for the Oaks, I go 10-4, 1 and 7 with Kathleen O on top for Shug McGahee. This filly has done nothing wrong in her 4-race career. She has dominated down in Florida, winning the Gulfstream Park Oaks right after the Devona Dale. But the neat thing about this horse, is her owner. It's 84-year-old, I think it's Patrick Carney. This is the first horse he's ever owned. He and his wife, Kathleen, who's her maiden name is O'Grady, I think, they're friends with Shug and his wife Allison. They play golf and they eat dinner, and he said he wanted to get involved with racing. And Shug said, he asked how he gets involved, and Shug said, well, you go out and buy a filly and a colt. So the filly he bought was this one, and look at this. He's got one of the favorites for the Oaks. I mean, and this horse, and if it does come up muddy, this horse does have a win in the mud, broker maiden at Aqueduct in the mud. That's my top pick. And second, I'm going with a favorite Nest, Todd Pletcher. This is another horse that's done very little wrong. Now, this horse is very similar in the pattern of her development going into this race. Same kind of development that Malathat had last year. The same kind of prep schedule. Won the Ashland, also won the Demoiselle at Aqueduct, and tempted at Belmont as a 2-year-old. Nest dominated the Ashland, and I don't blame anybody that wants to think that this horse can be the one that wins this race. Secret Oath from D. Wayne Lucas was the it horse earlier this year. I mean, she was dominating at Oak Lawn Park, won a couple stakes, including the Grade 3 Honeybee by daylight, and then Wayne decided to take her to the Arkansas Derby. Did not work out, finished third. If she had won the Arkansas Derby, I think he was going to still say I wasn't going to go to the Kentucky Derby. He was still going to go to the Oaks. But if this horse runs big in the Oaks, you might see her in the Preakness. Yeah. And the other horse that, Echo Zulu. I mean, how can you leave this filly out? She's undefeated in 5 starts. Earlier this year, they didn't even think she would make this race because she was absent from the work tab for so long. But she came back and won the Fairground Oaks in Grade 2 and was life and death to win that race with Hidden Connection, who's a long shot in this race. There's 2 ways of looking at it. Did she need the race, or is she on the downside? If she just needed the race and she's the same Echo Zulu, they might not catch her. So I think you have to use her in the exotics, and she also has a win over an off track. So that's how I see it.
I have the same horses in the mix, but I put the 13 in there as well. I went 10, 1, 7, and 13, and then I had 4 Nest just missing, and kind of one that I wouldn't argue against. I will mention Nest. I had Mike Welch from the Racing Forum on with me last weekend talking about some of the Oaks Derby workouts, and he was kind of leaning towards Nest. Speaking of which, I have Kathleen O on top. And the workout reports for her weren't that great, but Shug subsequently said, she doesn't work out that well in the morning. And down in Florida, she didn't work that well before either of the 2 victories. We were down that weekend, Gulfstream Park Oaks. We were covering the Florida Derby, and I saw the Gulfstream Park Oaks performance, and man, she was just super impressive. I think this is a really, really talented 3-year-old filly. We can keep our fingers crossed that, Coaching Club American Oaks and the Alabama, obviously with Shug McGahee training, are in the future. And if she comes up there as a Kentucky Oaks winner, even better. Love the story about her owner. And I was in the winner's circle after the Gulfstream Park Oaks as Mike Welch was interviewing Shug, and he was commenting on the owner and kind of that unique story. And he's really enjoying the ride. So Kathleen O on top for me. Secret Oath in the second spot. Yeah, this was a story horse, and a lot of people were really rooting for her in the Arkansas Derby. She had a little bit of a trip there. Now gets back in against fillies. Won't be surprised to see her rebound. Echo Zulu, I have down in the 3rd spot. For just the kind of reasons that you were alluding to, the comeback off a little bit of a longer layup than maybe you would have expected and really had to work for that. I'm looking at that a little askance, but man, she's talented. And I wouldn't be shocked to see her rebound and run very big. And Shahama, the 13, 15 to 1 on the morning line, new in the barn of Todd Pletcher, having come over from United Arab Emirates, come over from Dubai. And Flavian Prat is going to jump on board. This one's undefeated and won the UAE Oaks in the last start. If we get that 15 to 1 morning line, I think the horse is interesting. But like the Derby, there are many in here. One I'll kind of root for if the horse wins. Won't have it on my ticket, but Venti Valentine, you always have to root for the talented New York breds, New York bred program.
You do. Yeah. And the one thing, too, if people are apt to bet the favorite in this race, since they started parimutuel wagering, 37% of the favorites have won this race. But, since 2000, 12 favorites have lost. That's just something to keep in the back of the head. But also, the biggest thing, keep a watch on the weather.
Yeah, and speaking of the weather, when I looked, Saturday's weather looked a little more promising. It looked like maybe some rain in the morning as the day progressed on Saturday. Things would start to clear out. We'll keep our fingers crossed there. You and I were talking beforehand. That Churchill strip just seems to dry out so nicely that I think if it works out like that, well, even with some weather early on or on Friday, things may turn out okay by the time we get to just about 7 o'clock on Saturday
and the thing
for the
that's,
Derby.
The thing that's funny, too, is when the rains open up there, a lot of times the horsemen are not prepared for it. And you see these guys with their $1,000 suits on wearing garbage bags over them. It's quite comical. Yes. They look like the common man. They look like me and you.
and which makes this, it levels the playing field, which I'm all about. So we'll see how the weather plays out on Saturday. But again, the Derby coming up as the 12th race on Saturday at Churchill. And we'll take a look at each horse in the field and just give some quick comments before we give our actual selections. So why don't we start out with Mo Donegal, winner of the Remsen last year. And I think coming out of the Remsen, both Mo Donegal and Zandon were getting a lot of plaudits. And I don't know whether that's changed much. So, Tim, what are your thoughts on Mo Donegal?
You know, he was very visually impressive with that rally to win the Wood Memorial. He came home very fast in that race. I think he might have came home the fastest of any horse in any of the prep races, which, you know, I know it was, and I believe it's a pretty speed favoring track that day. But here's the rub. The Wood Memorial has been not very kind to the Kentucky Derby. I mean, the last horse that won the Wood, that won the Kentucky Derby, was Fushaichi Pegasus back in 2000. Granted, you've had winners of the Wood. Funny Side ran in the Wood. He was third, and he was obviously the Gutsy Gelding who won in 2003. You know, I have to use Mo Donegal in the mix because his impressive turn of foot in this race. You know, he's won 3 of 5 starts. He started in the Holy Bull, he was third, and then Todd sort of called an audible and not going to run in the Florida Derby, shipped up to New York, and it proved to be the right move. Todd, this will be with 3 horses in this race. He's going to increase his league leading total to 62 horses. No one's ever started more. He was 0 for 24 in his first starts in the Derby. Since then, he's 2 for 35. He's a Hall of Famer. And having Irad Ortiz doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to do with Mo Donegal. Coming out of that Remsen, I like both Mo Donegal and Zandon as 2-year-olds and looking forward to their 3-year-old season. And they pretty much kind of validated things as the season has progressed. So Mo Donegal coming out of that victory in the Wood Memorial gets the 1 post position. For years and years we've heard, you don't want the 1, you don't want the 1, you don't want the 1. But do note, that was back with the old gate. I don't know whether the 1 is still completely ideal, having 19 horses outside of you, but that old gate was just a screwy situation where you kind of had to make a right turn coming out of the gate. So I think you'd probably agree that the new gate, the 1 hole, is a little fairer.
There's much more room between the gate and the rail. I mean, the old days, it looked like there was a sliver of room. Now it's much more. It evens the playing field a little bit more. And, you know, with Mo Donegal, it's not like they're going to send him anyway. So, you know, he's I don't think Todd has any problem. Of course, he doesn't want the 1, but he's not going to cry about
it's not
this.
the 1 of 5 or 10 years ago.
No, it's not.
So for me, Mo Donegal is one I debated, and on some tickets, you know, I may play around with that horse in the mix. Certainly take a look at the odds as well. But it's Todd Pletcher, it's Irad Ortiz. Would be one of those 8 or 10 or 12 horses that wouldn't be a super surprise. One that I think would be a super surprise, number 2, Happy Jack, 30-1 on the morning line. Comes in from Southern California for Doug O'Neill with only the maiden victory underneath. Subsequently, the Bob Lewis, the San Felipe, the Santa Anita Derby, beaten by double digits in each of those. Only 4 starts under the belt, and none of them were particularly impressive. Blinkers off. You know, you come into a big race and you start making equipment changes. For me, this is in a field loaded with a lot of talented runners. This, for me, is an easy toss.
He hasn't run a fast race yet. In those last 3 races you're talking about, he's been beat a combined 50 lengths. Easy toss. Happy Jack will be sad, John.
This would be your mind that bird kind of. If he got it done, there is that potential. But Epicenter, one of the favorites, the second favorite on the morning line. Interesting how that played out with things kind of. I think the workouts really may have changed things. Zandon was working so well leading in. At Epicenter, a lot of folks thought, we'll be the favorite, and wound up to slightly be Zandon over Epicenter. But the second choice for Steve Asmussen. Your thoughts on Epicenter?
You know, you can't say anything wrong about what he's done. He's had nothing but good races. He's fast. He's also traction. He can track. Louisiana Derby, a professional win there. In the Risen Star, he was good in that. Beat by a head after setting the pace by a long shot. Call Me Midnight in the Lecomte. you know, if Steve Asmussen's ever going to win a Kentucky Derby, this is the guy that's probably going to do it. And depending on what Mattress Mac does, the wild man from Houston, the furniture man, does with his bet, Epicenter could end up being the favorite because he's going to bet like $4 zillion in this race.
I really like Epicenter, and I think that Louisiana Derby Trail this year was very productive. You know, you look at the buyer numbers, nice progression each time. We have a triple-digit buyer in there. As you say, in that Louisiana Derby, sat off the pace. I think that may be the game plan on Saturday. I went back a week and a half or so ago, looked at the charts for the last 10 Derbies, and really, other than Orb, virtually all of them were won by horses who were really right up there, 1, 2, or 3 throughout the race. Country House sat off, but of course he got moved up.
That one doesn't count.
Yeah, Maximum Security was
Yeah,
on the lead
yeah.
the whole way around. So again, I like the style of Epicenter where he can be out there. I don't think he will be on Saturday, but he can be right off, and he proved that that's a winning style for him. So Epicenter, to me, very, very playable for Asmussen and Rosario. Summer is tomorrow, comes in from Dubai. People are saying the workouts have been okay for this horse, tends to show some speed, maybe part of the early pace scenario. I mean, it's a horse that has shown some talent, 5 exacta finishes in 7 career starts, but could only do second in the UA Derby behind Crown Pride, who we'll talk about later, the Japanese runner. I wouldn't really argue against somebody who's going to maybe take a shot there at a big price, but doesn't get my juices flowing.
You know, Seth, Summer is tomorrow in a weird sort of way. And he's going to go off with one of the longest shots on the board. But he also might be one of the keys to the race.
Yeah.
Because when the gates open, he's going. And depending on how fast and how far he can go, he could dictate a lot of what happens in this race. Is he going to be around at the end? Absolutely not. He has a better chance of finishing last than he does first. But, you know, the UAE Derby is a race that does not produce Kentucky Derby winners. I think they're 0 for 16. And it's going to be 0 for 17. We'll talk about Crown Pride too. But Summers tomorrow is definitely not going to win this race. But he will be running early. He'll give his backers a thrill for a little bit.
Yeah, part of that early pace, certainly. Smile Happy. This, to me, very intriguing runner. I'm going to be interested to see what the odds are. It's 20-1 on the morning line, lightly raced, but already with a victory over the Churchill Downs Strip. I think that's going to be one of the keys for folks who kind of land there. But what are your thoughts on Smile Happy?
You know, I remember before the Bluegrass was run, Kenny McPeak, his trainer, who's, all these guys are optimists. All these guys think they have the second coming of Secretariat leading into the race. But Kenny said that if they're going to have a bear to beat him in the Bluegrass. And I remember after Kenny finished second to Zandon, Chad Brown tweeted out, "Well, I guess I had a bear," kind of thing. Smile Happy, he was getting a lot of buzz earlier this year down in Florida. I mean, talking to Dale Romans down in Florida, he said he was one of the best looking horses he saw down there. And, he's favored in his last 2 races, the Risen Star and the Bluegrass, second in both of them. That tells me he is a competitive horse. He just really hasn't put it all together. Does he win on Saturday? I don't think so. He's going to be a price if you want to use him. But to me, I think that you've got to use him somewhere because he is a consistent horse. And another thing too, I don't know if the distance is going to be his friend on this day.
Yeah, Smile Happy is another one of those horses that probably in some kind of wagers I will have in the mix somewhere. Don't have him up on top, but I agree. I think we're going to get a little bit of value there. I think it's very positive that the horse has a win over the track. Churchill can be a little quirky. The buyers are moving in the right direction, although he's paired together a couple this season. Now, I had Kenny McPeak on before that start, the seasonal debut in the Risen Star. I said, well, what do you expect on Saturday? He said, you know what, I'm not going to be really cranked up. If I get in the mix. I'm second or third. I'll be happy with that. He wound up with a second. And off of that, yeah, then he was kind of positive in the Bluegrass. And it wasn't a bad performance. I mean, Zandon is one of the favorites in here. So 5th career start, gets back to Churchill. I'm not going to make any strong argument against Smile Happiness. I say, look up at the odds and I may put him in the mix. But he's not up in my top echelon. But I certainly wouldn't argue anybody off of him, particularly, again, at what looks like it should be a decent little price.
And in his last race, and in that Bluegrass, he was a little wide going into that first turn. So, you know, it is all about the trip in every race, and especially in this one.
Yeah, he is very, very intriguing to me. And the number 6 horse on Saturday is going to be Messier. Of course, the storyline there, Bob Baffert trainees, banned from Churchill Downs. That means some of his good 3-year-olds had moved over to other trainers. Tim Yakteen has a couple. And that concerns me a little bit. This one and Taba, clearly talented enough. But I'm just wondering if that does somehow play a role in this story, the move to a trainer who is not known as a Derby trainer in anywhere near the same way that Bob Baffert is. Did look good in the Bob Lewis, maybe a little bit disappointing last time in the Santa Anita Derby, but boy, this horse is going to be playing from the bell, you would think, and it's going to be out there in that style that, as I said earlier, seems to have played over the last 10 or so Kentucky Derbies, being in the mix early. John Velasquez on board. That would be a fun side story to see him grab another winner in the Kentucky Derby at this stage in his career. So I'm not arguing against Messier. I just, on the trainer change, I wasn't sure what to do with those 2 California runners. What are your thoughts?
You know, part of me thinks that Big Brother is watching. I'm not totally convinced that Bob Baffert doesn't have a hand in what's going on. There are things known as phones. Tim Yakteen, of course, is going to say that he hasn't talked to Bob. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. Bob Baffert knows how to get a horse ready for the Kentucky Derby. That's proven. And Messier, you know, when he won the Lewis by 15 lengths, they were about ready to christen him as the next Citation, for lack of not saying Secretariat again. But he's fast, he's tactical. And the thing with him, he's first or second in all of his races. But there are some knocks on him. This is a 20-horse field. He's never raced in a field bigger than 6. Maybe he gets out on that track and he's like, whoa, what am I looking at here? But he also might be, he's a big, bad horse, boy. And if John Velasquez, he knows how to ride and win these races. I mean, I could see him maybe doing the same thing he did with Medina Spirit last year, gunning to the gate, catch me if you can, and maybe they don't catch him. I think that he's a very, very intriguing horse. And in the Santa Anita Derby, he did all the dirty work, chasing Forbidden Kingdom, and that set it up for Taba. I think that Messier, with that experience under his belt, heading into this race, is going to be a loaded bear, and he's going to take a lot of beating, I think.
Yeah, and you make a great point about the out there Forbidden Kingdom, who, for folks who don't remember, Santa Anita Derby, he came in with all kinds of buzz and promise, and unfortunately flopped, but he's in the back of the pack, and up there running early with him was Messier, who holds on for second. So the second actually may be better than it looks. I said earlier a little bit disappointing, and it probably was, but again, it may be better than it actually looks. Number 7 on Saturday is Crown Pride, Japanese-based runner. 3 wins and 4 career starts, won the UAE Derby in his last start. Reports are working well. Normally these I would kind of toss, but boy, Japanese runners over the past, 8 months or so internationally have done so well. What are your thoughts on Crown Pride?
You know, it's funny. You know, it was more of a standing joke, I think, when the Japanese would bring horses to the classic races in America. Last year, Francisco de Ina came for the Preakness and the Belmont, and, you know, when he was at the Preakness, he dumped his rider and ran around the track by himself. But this one seems to have a little bit more of a buzz to him. I mean, he's out on the track for like 45 minutes a day. runs around in circles. It seems like he works every day. That's just the way they do things there. But the UAE Derby, as I've said before, it's a tough do to win the race over in Dubai at the end of March, then ship over here to have him run a mile and a quarter on the first Saturday in May. Just to put it in perspective, like I said, there were 16 horses from the UAE Derby that have come to the Kentucky Derby, and 11 of those horses won the UAE Derby. The best finish was by a horse named Master of Hounds, who was 5th. I mean, the last foreign bred to run in the Derby, Master Fencer from Japan, finished 6th in 2019. I mean, yes, because of what the Japanese have done at the Breeders' Cup last year and the big day they had in the Dubai World Cup day, people should pay attention. But I don't think, to me, I don't think he wins America's greatest horse race.
Yeah, a little bit of an obstacle, a little bit of a hurdle for me, too, to jump on this one. Only 4 starts again. The UAE Derby was back on March 26th. That's on the cusp of when I would think, the Florida Derby was a week later, and I like Florida Derby horses as, being ones to maybe take a look at. But again, this is a week earlier, and it's just maybe starts to get to that point where you're kind of far out of a race. You're lightly raced overall. All of that said, you alluded to it, I mentioned it earlier, the workout reports have been very good. Quirky, I guess it's the Japanese style, but as you say, he's on the track longer than other horses. He was on the track today working.
Yeah.
As we record this on a Wednesday, and got in some work. And then they go out and they walk him around, and he looks around and whatnot. And you look at the page here that I have on the racing form, and April 27th, 46 and change bullet. There are things to like. I can't pull the trigger there. It's another one of those horses, though, I wouldn't necessarily, talk anybody out of.
One thing about him, Seth, he'll have the most steps of any horse in this race, if they have the Fitbit.
Yeah, and fitness does count, and like I say, it may be the Japanese way, so we'll see what Crown Pride. Another one that I'm going to be interested to see where the betting public goes, because there are a lot of everyday bettors in the Kentucky Derby, but I think real horse racing savvy people kind of are on to Japan, going back to the Breeders' Cup, Dubai, and international racing over the past, as I say, 8 or 9 months. They've been very prolific, and I'm going to be intrigued to see what the betting public winds up with as that one goes into the gate. Horse that I wanted to use, and then when the PPs came out and I started to look a little more, I just couldn't pull the trigger, but going to be intrigued to see what he does on Saturday, and I have a feeling going forward, Charge It, the number 8 horse, is going to be a really nice 3-year-old for Todd Pletcher, but maybe a little lightly raced here. I liked him in the Florida Derby, and I thought he ran well to be second, but he was clearly running kind of greenly, had some trouble in there. So again, a lightly raced, talented horse, Luis Saez on board. I could make the argument there. I kind of wanted to pull the trigger, but as I looked, I just thought, you know what, in here, it's a tough ask being lightly raced and stretching out to the 1.25 miles and start number 4. Down the road, this will be a nice horse. If I look up the board and I see that 20-1 or 30-1, maybe I'll slip a couple or $4 on him just in case, because I do like Charge It. I don't think I'm going to pull the trigger on Saturday, however. Your thoughts?
After he broke his maiden in his second start by 8 1/4 lengths, Todd Pletcher decided, we're going to the Florida Derby. I mean, that's a big ask right there. Go from a maiden to a grade 1. And in that race, he banged himself coming out of the gate. And, this is a horse with 2 starts now, and he's in the Florida Derby. But he got himself into the race, and, as they were heading for home, I mean, he looked a little bit like a drunken sailor running through the stretch. I mean, very inexperienced, but he still finished second. I mean, you cannot deny that this horse has a boatload of talent, and he might not win on Saturday, but he might win the Travers.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to be one to clearly watch going forward. Plenty of talent, and it could come up on Saturday, but if it doesn't come up on Saturday, keep your eyes on him through the summer, certainly. Number 9, Tiz the Bomb, goes out for Kenny McPeak. Really intriguing in that this horse has been on dirt, has been on turf, has been on synthetic. I had Ken on, as I say, a little bit earlier this year, and we talked a little bit about Tiz the Bomb. And at that point, he said, yeah, we're going to go try the stake at Turfway on the synthetic, and maybe a little bit later we'll go to Royal Ascot and run over in Europe on the grass. But they come out of the Battaglia win and a nice win in the Jeff Ruby Stakes stake, and they have Derby points. And, you know, you can make the argument here, oh, well, those were on synthetic and the horses run well on turf. But his maiden victory was on the dirt at Ellis Park. So Tiz the Bomb to me is really interesting. But how do you see Tiz the Bomb?
You know, yeah, the Jeff Ruby Stakes, very impressive win. But the Jeff Ruby Stakes is not run on dirt. It's on the synthetic. And to me, going back to the last time we saw Tiz the Bomb on the dirt was in the Holy Bull, and he was awful.
Yeah,
he was just horrible. He got beat by 20 lengths, was never in the race, and there was really no apparent reason for it. They couldn't find anything wrong with the horse. So that tells me you got to put him in the Kentucky Derby back on dirt with 19 of the best horses in the country, and he's going to compete. You know, I'm sorry, and I love Kenny McPeak. I think he's a great guy, a great trainer, but I think he is totally mismatched here. And if he wins, God bless him.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. As I say, he does have a dirt win earlier on the resume, but yeah, if you look at that Holy Bull performance, that was not a positive development as far as how this horse will perform on Saturday on the dirt. So again, it's one of those, if somebody said I'm going to use him, I wouldn't talk anybody out of it because it's a horse clearly in some good form, and you put a little trust in Kenny, and I think the workouts have been okay for this one, but it's not a horse I'm going to put into my mix.
I'd try to talk him out of it, especially if they were borrowing money from me.
A horse I will have in my mix, number 10, Zandon. Lightly raced, but it's Chad Brown. It's a runner that won the debut and then kind of controversially ran second in the Remsen, as they did take a look at that, but left Mo Donegal up. Zandon ran second. I said earlier, I like both of those coming out of the Remsen as potentially turning into nice 3-year-olds. They both lived up to it. Maybe a little bit disappointing, the 3-year-old debut in the Risen Star, but then followed that up in the Bluegrass. And with that Bluegrass victory and the way he's been working reportedly at Churchill the past couple of weeks, Zandon, you know, just barely jumped over Epicenter, at least as the morning line favorite. Going to be interested to see where the betting public goes, but off of that Bluegrass victory. That said, comes from a little bit out of it, then a 20-horse field might be up against it a little bit. I'm going to have Zandon in my mix, not on top because of the come-from-behind style, but I just think Chad Brown, really talented runner. Flavien Prat on board. Zandon, to me, is certainly one that has to be in the mix, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you, Seth. He's a big, beautiful horse, and he has looked the part this week at Churchill Downs. His run in the Bluegrass, he ran like a confident horse. He ran like a horse that knew exactly what he was doing. It didn't hurt that Flavien Prat, who was on for the first time. It's an interesting thing, you know. He's had 4 starts and he's had 4 different jockeys, but Flavien seems to fit this horse, and you know, he doesn't fit the usual, at least recent Derby profile like you talked before, but you know, he's going to make that one run. And the thing is, there are so many things that can go wrong in the Kentucky Derby. You get behind a wall of horses, you start taking the kickback, and you don't have a seam. You know, you got to find your own. You got to find racing luck. He has to find racing luck, and if he does find racing luck, I think with that turn of foot that he has late, he could mow them down. And it would be a great story for this area.
Yeah.
Have the local guy Chad Brown win the Kentucky Derby. His best, I think he's 0 for 6. His best finish was Good Magic and 18 behind Justify. And Chad is high on this horse. It would not be a surprise if he won, but he's going to have some work to do.
Yeah, no question about it. Moving on to number 11, Pioneer Medina. I'll toss it to you to give some thoughts. I'm going to be interested to see what you have to say, because this guy's getting into my mix, and I think going to be a decent price legitimately. What do you think of Pioneer Medina?
Well, I think you're right. He will be a good price. He hasn't in his 2 prep races, the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby. He was 4th and 3rd, but he didn't really finish strong in either of them races. Todd's going to take the blinkers off for this one. He's another guy. He basically got in late. He wasn't in the field until late, and Todd had to scramble to get a ride. We got Jersey Joe Bravo, and he's another one. This is another horse that he had 1, 2, 3, 6 races, 7th race now, and he's got a different jockey in each race. He's by Pioneer of the Nile. I think that the people that want to take a shot because it's Todd Pletcher, they'd get paid. But he hasn't shown that he can run with some of the big boys in this division. He wasn't able to handle Epicenter or Zandon or even Smile Happy. So his work's cut out for him. But again, it's Todd Pletcher. I can't fault anyone that's going to take a swing with him.
Yeah, going back to the optional claimer in January at the fairgrounds, I found it interesting that Todd elected to go over there. I think it was Lecomte Day. Goes over and takes a shot there and runs nicely on the lead, wins there at 7-1 off the maiden breaker. And then from there, they try the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby. Maybe a little bit disappointing, but each of those races, the buyer figure moved forward. The third place finish last time was interesting. I think the horse probably has to get a little bit faster on the numbers. I don't think that's out of the question because we've been moving forward right along. We have 30-1 on the morning line. Todd Pletcher with a horse like this at a big price. I'm going to put Pioneer of Medina into my mix. One that will not be in my initial mix, but I'll play around with this horse a little bit, particularly if we get the morning line at 12-1 Taba. It's another one of the Tim Yachtine horses, who we had talked about before with Messier. Was a Bob Baffert horse. Started the career winning a maiden special weight race at 1-2. Then goes into the Santa Anita Derby. Because the owner wanted to go in. Yachtine, off the being lightly raced, was not necessarily enthusiastic about it, but the owner decides, we're going to take our shot, and wins both of the races with triple-digit buyers. And if you look at the PPs in here on 20 horses, and I think even if you include the AEs, there are 3 horses with triple-digit buyers. Epicenter last time, Messier 2 back in the Bob Lewis, and the 2 triple digits from Taba. I will tell you one bet I'm making for sure. I'm boxing those 3 up. Just so after the race, when it's like, that was so easy. All you had to do was play the buyer numbers. I'm going to have an exacta to cover those. But, and when I toss it to you, I'll get your thought on this as well. I've been around the game long enough that I just can't get over the hump of 2 starts into the Derby. That said, Justified kind of broke a lot of those rules, and I think if you get past, the last 10 years or so, I think you can point to rules that are broken since I kind of was in the game. The whole dosage, that kind of went by the wayside, but you can rely on that for years and years. So I just may be an old fossil here, and believe me, I think Taba has a ton of talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if that one wins. As I say, I'll have an exacta box that includes him. But with only the 2 starts under the belt, I just can't pull the trigger here. How do you see Taba?
Seth, Taba might very well be the most talented horse in this field. Yeah. His resume isn't very big, but look what he's done. I mean, he went from the maiden, and he stretched out 3 more furlongs in the second start in the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby, and went past Messier, who is considered to be, the head of, or near the head of the class. It's like the schoolboy schooling the college veteran. I mean, he's impressed. But again, the 2 starts, this is going from the Santa Anita Derby, there were 6 horses, and he's going to go into a field with 20 horses. And these horses, and granted, the Santa Anita Derby, was a nice little field. Every horse in this field is good, for the most part, is a good horse. And for him, if he comes out and wins this race, he's a super horse. I can't use him. I mean, because of the things you said. Since with 2 lifetime starts, there's been one horse that did it in 1883. 1883 that won this thing. And since 1937, there's been 4 horses with 2 starts that have entered the Derby. And the best finish was by the great China Visit in 2000, finished 6th. If Taba is able to duplicate what he did in the Derby, I'll bow my head, congratulate him, and say, this is one of the best horses we've ever seen. But I'm not betting that that's going to happen.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting storyline in the race with the veteran Mike Smith on board.
Who would become the oldest jockey to ever win this race.
Yeah.
Past the Shoe.
Surpassing Shoemaker, yeah.
Mike's 56, and I think the Shoe was 54.
Yeah. Number 13 is Simplification, another horse I have in my mix, and I'm going to play around with at potentially a big price. What do you see from Simplification?
Well, I'm just not wowed by any of the horses coming out of Florida. Usually Florida is the playground for horses coming into the Kentucky Derby, but I just don't see it this year. He didn't run a bad race in the Florida Derby. He sat right off the pace in that race and finished 3rd. Antonio Sano is a good story in himself. Simplification he's always right there. I mean, 3 wins and 7 starts. But to me, he's a cut below these. I don't see him being a factor in this race. It might come back to bite me, but he's not someone I'm going to use.
Yeah, I've been saying for a couple of weeks he's an interesting horse to me at a potentially a price. He was one I was going to use, and I haven't seen any reason to change my opinion because he's been working very well down at Gulfstream by all reports. And I think there may be like a Thunder Gulch factor here. He looked really good winning the Fountain of Youth, and then as the favorite in the Florida Derby wound up 3rd. A 3rd out of the Florida Derby, kind of, as I say, the Thunder Gulch factor, the good workouts, Jose Ortiz on board, 20-1 on the morning line. I'm going to play around. He's definitely in my mix. Barber Road, the number 14 horse, comes out of a 2nd in the Arkansas Derby, a 3rd in the Rebel, a 2nd in the Southwest. He has been in the exacta 6 of 8 times. Raylu Gutierrez, which would be a fun story, upstate New York's own, out in the Rochester area he grew up, so that would be kind of a fun story. But Barber Road for me, I'm a numbers guy. The buyers factor into my handicapping. They're a tool in the toolbox. They aren't the be-all, end-all, but I just think on the numbers, Barber Road is a little too slow for this bunch, so I'm not going to use him. What do you think of Barber Road?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a buyer that's he hasn't reached 90, and to win this race, you got to be up in the 90s, high 90s. I mean, he's not as fast as a lot of these, Seth, and the Arkansas Derby wasn't exactly the toughest field that we've seen. Yeah, he was 2nd behind Brad Cox's Cyberknife, but to me, he's had plenty of chances. I mean, on the Derby Road, he was 3rd in the Rebel behind Unoho, the one-eyed New York bred, and D. Wayne's Ethereal Road, who's snuck into the field late. And Ethereal Road isn't going to be a factor in this race, I don't believe. I just think he's up against it. He'd have to take a big step forward to land in the top 10.
Like I say, I won't be using him, but if somebody said to me, I'm going to put him down at the bottom of my triples, that I wouldn't necessarily. I still think he probably has to, but crazy things do happen underneath, and so I could see that. For me, no, but I could, again, wouldn't argue necessarily with somebody going with that angle. Number 15, White Barrio. Safi Joseph runner, Tyler Gaffleone on board, the winner of the Holy Bull, the winner of the Florida Derby. What are you going to do with White Barrio?
Toss him. No, because he's the Florida Derby. I was not impressed with the Florida Derby. And the thing with White Barrio, if the Kentucky Derby was being run in Florida, he might be the favorite. I mean, he's 4 for 4 in races in Florida. The one time he ventured outside the state was last year in the Kentucky Jockey Club, the Grade 2. He ran an okay 3rd, but he's at his best when he's at his home track in Florida. And I'm not so sure but you can say this about a lot of them, but I'm not so sure about this one going 1.25 miles. For those that like him, yes, he was dominant in Florida. Will he be able to duplicate that in Louisville? I don't know. But one thing I do know, as long as it's not raining, you'll be able to see him. He's that big gray white horse, and he's a strikingly good-looking animal.
I'm not going to use him. Wouldn't argue anybody off of him, though. I mean, the workout reports seem to have been pretty good. He's been down in Florida like simplification, but the workout reports have been very good. I will say, we were down for the Florida Derby, so talked to Safi before the Florida Derby. He then came into the press room afterwards and at a press conference, and very emotional. It was, fun to see that Safi, his story of coming over from Barbados and having a tough couple of years, and his dad saying, we're going to stick it out, and then he wins the Florida Derby down at the track where he is based. Now he's spreading out, but so it was kind of a fun victory, certainly. That said, he said before the race, he said after the race, before the Holy Bull, before the Florida Derby, the horse had some hiccups in training where Safi wasn't quite sure what he was going to get in those races. And so even he was a little bit surprised with the big performances there. So I think this is a very talented horse. And again, I don't have him in my mix. This is one, though, that, as they say, some of those, I'm going to play some triple pyramids or those kind of things. And so some of these horses I don't have up in my top 3 or 4 that I've said I'm going to use in my mix. I'll put them down in some of the spots below, second and third. For triples and whatnot. And Way to Barrio is likely to make that mix, as I think will number 16, Cyberknife, won the Arkansas Derby. I said earlier I'm a buyer's guy. I would say coming out of the Arkansas Derby, the 92 buyer was a lifetime best, maybe moving in the right direction, but still that number for me was a little bit light. But the reports are just been working very well. And off of those reports, and Florent Giroux on board, it's Brad Cox. Again, this may be one I'll use in some of my underneath spots, but Cyberknife, I think, again, on the numbers, maybe a little bit light, but I don't think it's out of the question that this horse could continue moving forward. What do you see from Cyberknife?
After the Arkansas Derby, it was like the light switch went on a little bit in this horse. I mean, he's starting to get it. He was much more professional when he won the Arkansas Derby. It was his first Grade 1. Brad was very enthusiastic after the race and talked about how he really thinks if he takes another step up, he can be a factor in Louisville. And because it's Brad Cox who's become, people in Louisville bet Brad Cox because he wins everything down there. I wouldn't say he's the Todd Pletcher of Louisville quite yet, but he's on that track, and you can't argue with the success that Brad has had down there. And the one thing he really, really wants to do is win the Derby, seeing his horse cross the finish line first, rather than have it handed to him on a DQ. Is Cyberknife the horse that's going to do that for him? I'm not sure, but he has the potential to improve off the Arkansas Derby. Whether that's good enough to compete with these, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and you were referring to Mandaloon, who won last year after the DQ of Medina Spirit, and I think Brad was quoted as saying, kind of like, well, it's great. I now have that on my resume, but it's not quite the same, which you can see. I mean, you played sports too, and neither of us are at the Brad Cox level of sports. But yeah, that sinking the three-pointer that wins the basketball game is a lot different than 3 months later them saying, you know what, the team you played, we're going to disqualify them, so you won the game. There's a vast difference between those experiences.
Yeah, give me my trophy.
Classic Causeway. I'd be interested to hear your take on this one. I think there is definitely some talent there, definitely going to play into the pace, I would imagine. And so Classic Causeway is interesting, but boy, that Florida Derby.
Seth, after the Florida Derby, Brian Lynch came out and said, we're not going to the Derby. And they changed course a little bit. It sounds to me like he has an owner that wants to have a horse in the Kentucky Derby, and hey, you cannot blame him for that. I mean, in the Florida Derby, he just stopped. I mean, he was prominent early, and then he just stopped, and he didn't raise his feet the rest of the way. But there was nothing wrong with him. I mean, he looked a much different animal in Tampa when he won the Sam Davis and Tampa Bay Derby. Granted, those fields were nothing like he saw in Florida or even in the Florida Derby or what he'll see on Saturday. But, you know, his only chance is to go from the get-go. And, you know, he'll be on the pace, but I just don't see him being around when they get to the kitchen at the stretch.
I'm pretty much in the same boat. That Florida Derby, boy. Now, potentially we draw a line through that. Okay, you draw a line through that and you go back to the Tampa races. They were both very good. And I think, again, this is a 3-year-old who will he reach the top echelon, but this is going to be a nice 3-year-old stakes performer as the year goes along if they pick their spots. I just think, as I say, even if you go back to the nice 2 Tampa races, on the numbers they seem a little slow. So he'll be a player, but not on my tickets. Similar scenario for me probably with Tawny Port. Comes out of the win in the Lexington on the dirt, second in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. So they were kind of searching for points last time on the dirt. They got it. They'll head to the Derby. But what are your thoughts on Tawny Port?
Oh, he's a toss for me, Seth. Horses don't come out of the Lexington and win the Kentucky Derby. The last one I think to do it was Charismatic back in '99. You know, he's also a horse when, you know, he was in the Jeff Ruby and the Synthetic, and before that he was on the dirt in the Risen Star, and he was nowhere against the likes of Epicenter and Zandon and Smile Happy. And there's another reason he can't win this race, because I have a bet with Dale Romans, our friendly trainer from Kentucky. I told Dale, if Tawny Port wins the Kentucky Derby, I'll wash his car every day at Saratoga. And Dale said that he's going to buy a big Pilot or a big car, and he's going to drive through mud every day if Tawny Port is able to win this race. So I'm pretty confident I'm not going to have to wash Mr. Roman's car.
I would go along with that. I think Tawny Port is up against it a little bit, again, coming out of the Lexington, as you say, which is not necessarily productive. And I think if you go back to when it was productive, horses were stringing races together a little bit tighter in the night. You know, things have stretched out, and now the Lexington is kind of right on top of the Derby as well, so the timing isn't necessarily beneficial. And so, yeah, Tawny Port, a little bit dicey in the whole scenario on the numbers as well. All right, number 19, Zozos. It's another Brad Cox trainee, as was Tawny Port, coming out of a second in the Louisiana Derby in career start number 3. What are your thoughts on Zozos?
You know, he set all the pace in the Louisiana Derby until Epicenter got rolling late and beat him. A usable effort, you know, it wasn't bad. But the Louisiana Derby, that was his 3rd start. They're asking him to do a lot, too, in a short time. I don't think that he's a horse that will be on any of my tickets, and I don't think he'll be on a lot of people's tickets, except for the Brad Cox factor. Manny Franco is coming down from New York to ride this horse, and he wasn't super fast on the lead in Louisiana. To me, he might be prominent early for a while, but I don't see him being prominent late.
Yeah, and he's stuck in the outside. So, and as you say, he likes to be up or near the front, but is he fast enough to get out there in the 20-horse field? So will he be hung out? It's Manny Franco on board. Florence are always on board, but not on board. Manny Franco's a fine jockey, but the Derby's a little bit of a different situation. So lightly raced, and you know, it was a good performance in Louisiana. Another one that, as the summer progresses, he may find his spots, but I think this is maybe a little too much for Zozos. And finally, the number 20, should say there's a couple of AEs in here, but I don't think they're going to make the field at this point. We haven't heard anything. And once betting starts...
Friday morning.
Yeah, okay, Friday morning.
I think Friday at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m.
Things will lock in. But number 20, Ethereal Road, goes out for Wayne Lucas. You know, Wayne Lucas adds a fun side story to the Kentucky Derby, but again, on the buyer numbers, can't pull the trigger there.
No, I mean, he got a little bit of a buzz when he was second in the Rebel, and Wayne is talking if he's got any chance at all. He says he can make. He says this horse can make a prolonged late run the half mile out, which is that's asking a lot. Yeah, it's a great story. They have Dwayne in this race, and he loves nothing more than to pull off upsets in big races because he's done it a lot in his career. Think Thunder Gulch, think Oxbow, just to name a few. But I think he's kind of up against it here.
And just toss out the two AEs, Rich Strike and Rattle and Roll. If Rattle and Roll happen to get in, that one's a little bit interesting. I think it's probably unlikely that they do, but any interest in either the AEs?
Zero.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. Like I say, Rattle and Roll, maybe a little, but not much. All right, we've gone through the entire field, so let's narrow it down to how we're going to play it. Tim, what are your picks for the Derby?
Okay, Seth. I mean, it's and you know, races like this, the most important thing is the brake. If they don't brake well, you might as well head to the parking lot before they get to the first turn, because the brake is very, very important in this race. So I'm going to go 6, 10, 1, and 5. Messier on top. I think he has the capability to control this race from start to finish, and John Velasquez knows how to do that. Think about Medina Spirit last year, the ill-fated Medina Spirit. And does this horse have the same kind of fight as Medina Spirit did? I'm not positive about that, but I think he's got oodles of talent. And if he shows up, if the Messier that won the Lewis by 15 shows up in that race, they're going to have he's going to have the rest of these horses over a barrel. And I have Zandon second for Chad. I think he works out a trip and is very prominent at the end. Same with Mo Donegal. I'm using another closer. And Smile Happy, I think he might put it all together and run a big one for Kenny McPeak and finish fourth.
Just showing what we've been saying all along. It's that kind of a field, that kind of a Derby. We only have one overlap with Zandon. I have a 3, 11, 10, and 1, and 13, 3, 11, 10, and 13. Epicenter on top, shot the triple-digit buyer in the Louisiana Derby with a little bit of a stalking trip. I'm hoping for that on Saturday. Let's see Summers tomorrow and Classic Causeway, maybe Messier out there. Let's get a good start from the 3 for Epicenter. If Epicenter, as you say, stutter steps or whatnot, and 8 or 9 horses go over and he's 8th or 9th into the first turn, I'm not quite as enthusiastic, but hopefully he gets a good start, and there is a little positional early speed, so I think he can sit off like he did in the Louisiana Derby and benefit from that whole scenario. Pioneer of Medina, again, seems to maybe be improving. So that one in simplification, coming out of third place finishes in the Louisiana Derby and the Florida Derby. We're looking for that kind of Thunder Gulch factor to benefit from those performances and move forward on Saturday. And those two bookends, Zandon in the third spot, just very talented for Chad Brown, and coming out of that Bluegrass win, I think you got to tilt in that direction. As I said earlier, though, I will be making an exacta box of Epicenter, Messier, and Taba on the triple-digit buyer factor, because sometimes it's just that easy, so I'm not going to let that slip by. But for me, in the Kentucky Derby, 3, 11, 10, and 13. So there's a look at the Derby. Let's take a look at a couple of the undercard races, so people maybe making some pick bets, some pick fours or whatnot, have a couple ideas. So why don't we start out in the race just prior to the Derby, the Turf Classic. And again, a lot of this will depend on the weather, certainly. But again, going back to last weekend, I had Mike Welch on Sunday morning. They had a little rain on Saturday at Churchill, Saturday evening. Mike said, the turf course looks great. They're scheduled on Sunday to be on the turf. They were. So seems like the drainage on the new turf course works out well. So in the Turf Classic, we're looking at $1 million purse, a Grade 1 event, 1 mile and an eighth the trip. How'd you see the Turf Classic?
You know, the way this race has been going lately, you might as well just rename it the Chad Brown Classic. He's won the last 3. He's got 3 in this one. I went 8-1, 3-6. I put Chad's Adamo at 9-2. He's making his second U.S. start. He came over from France. He has shown some ability. I think he just missed in the Grade 2 Fairgrounds, losing to a 35-1 shot. Dallas Stewart's horse, who's in this race, with the cavalry charge. I think Chad's horse has plenty of class, and he's gonna be on the way to start of a good career in the U.S. And following him, we're gonna go. I got so many notes here, Seth. It's driving me crazy. I'm gonna take the one horse, Invar, Paulo Lobo, Joe Talamo. It's his first start since rallying second in the Breeders' Cup Mile. All three of his starts last year were in Grade 1s. I think he can rally and get a piece of this. Third, I'm taking another Chad, Public Sector, won 4-7 last year. And the 6 horse, Cheryl's Spite, Roger Atfield, who he's 4 for 6, she's 4 for 6 lifetime. It might be the class of the race, but I'm going to take a shot against the favorite.
Another fun race where you can make a case for a bunch of them. And it's really 2 days of that kind of racing where it's going to be tough to come up with winners, but when you do, you will get paid. I have it in the Turf Classic, 5, 10, 6, and 4, but I do Adamo. I have that one just at the bottom of the mix. That'll be in my plays in some fashion. But I'm going to take a shot with Merrow Mission. Goes out for Ian Wilkes, has tossed a couple of triple-digit buyers recently, the Canadian Turf win at Gulfstream, and then a pretty close finish in the Maker's Mark Mile last time behind Cheryl Spite. And, Cheryl Spite's going to be morning line, 3-1, and Merrow Mission being just behind that one last time, 10-1. I'll take that, so I'm going to take a little shot there. Second spot, I'm going to go out with Santon on the outside, lightly raced, but seems to have shown a little bit of talent, particularly in a good start last time in the Muñez Memorial down at Fairgrounds. And Tyler Gaffleone on board. I think that horse can be a player. Cheryl Spite. Tribubin was the Chad Brown runner I used, and you may be right on it. I may be making a mistake for not using one of the Chads on top because he is very good in this race. And Ivar, who you used in your mix, I looked at that one, and I'm probably going to kick myself afterwards, but you look at that string of triple-digit buyers. But the lone recent race, or the one that breaks the streak on the page, was this race last year at Churchill. That made me shy away, but that just could have been an aberration because Ivar certainly has plenty of talent. But for me, 5, 10, 6, and 4, with the 8 being worth a little bit of a look as well. And finally, let's take a look at the Churchill Downs Stake itself, which is $750,000 for sprinters, 4-year-olds and up, going 7 furlongs. Field of 8 in here. Certainly Jackie's Warrior is going to take a lot of attention. We saw Jackie's Warrior, of course, last summer up at Saratoga being very impressive in the Amsterdam and the Allen Jerkins. Jackie's Warrior on top for you, or are you going to go in another direction?
I'm not picking against Jackie's Warrior. I think he is, without question, the best sprinter in the country. He came back first start after winning the Breeders' Cup Sprint at Oaklawn in the last month in April, and won the Count Fleet Sprint Handicap in his usual workman-like way, going to the lead and no one being able to catch him. I remember talking last year down at Parks to Joel Rosario after they won the Gallant Bob, and I asked Joel, I said, how do you describe the way this horse runs? And he says there's 2 ways that he runs. He goes, he runs fast and he runs faster. And he's right. I mean, this horse just goes out and does his job. So I'm putting him on top. I don't think he's lost anything. He's won 9 of 13. The only 2 times he was ever off the board, ironically, were in the 2 races he was in the Breeders' Cup. The Breeders' Cup Sprint last year when he was 6th, and in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as a 2-year-old, he was 4th. So I think this horse still looks the part. So I'm putting him on top. I'm going with Chad Brown's Reinvestment Risk, the 5 in this. He ran a pretty good second to the very, very good Speaker's Corner in the Carter, the Grade 1 Carter in his last start. That came off of an allowance race. Both races provided 100 buyers for him. And that was his first start since last June. He was gone for 8 months. But he seems to be back, and Chad Brown, he runs them when they're ready. He does do that. And if in his mind he thinks the horse can run and is ready to run, he'll run. And he expects good things out of it. In the third spot, I'm going with Cezanne. He's another former Baffert horse, now with Todd Pletcher. He's making his first start since April. First start for Todd. He was just beaten by a neck in the Oaklawn Mile. And I think that, he's 4 wins and 7 career starts. I think he can get a piece of this. And Aloha West, I mean, he surprised some people last year when he won the Breeders' Cup Sprint at 11-1. This is his first start back since then. I'm thinking he might need one, but he's also got his last 3 starts last year all produced 100 buyers. If he's right, he's going to take some beating, but I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to take the wait and see attitude because he's got to show me that he's back.
I flip-flopped your top 2. I have a 5-3, 8-1. I have the 7 down at the bottom. Mind Control for Pletcher, I think, has some potential. But I flip-flopped. I went with Reinvestment Risk on top over Jackie's Warrior. And it bugs me because I am a huge Jackie's Warrior fan. The 2 performances up at Saratoga were just phenomenal. And I will note, one of those was in the slop. So if there's moisture in the track, Jackie's Warrior maybe deserves an extra look. But Reinvestment Risk, as you kind of alluded to, only had the 1 start last year as a 3-year-old. And so far, it started really early this year, January, February, March. We had the 3-year-olds from last year who came back and as 4-year-olds started to establish themselves as really talented runners in the handicap division. And I think Reinvestment Risk might be one of those. He looked good in the seasonal debut, and then to run second off a layoff, second start off a layoff like that and run second to Speaker's Corner, who might wind up as the best horse of the first part of the year anyway. I thought that was a nice performance. So I'll tilt slightly towards Reinvestment Risk over Jackie's Warrior. Again, in the Churchill, I have it 5-3, 8-1. All right, there it is. A look, the Oaks, the Derby, a couple of undercard stakes as well, and we have only hit on a fraction of the 2 days.
There are very, very, very good races both days. It's a horse player's dream. And even the people that don't follow horse racing, pick up a racing form and peruse it. You'll become fans.
Yeah, have some fun, certainly. And you can have fun on a day like this just with some win bets, but play around a little bit, take the money off the bankroll, and parse yourself out, particularly if you have real thoughts in the Derby. If you're playing over the couple of days, don't shoot the wad early. If you have an opinion in the Derby, make sure you preserve a little bit and kind of, work the bankroll over the couple of days so you can get to some of the horses you're really enamored with because there are going to be opportunities all day long, both Oaks and Derby Day. And Tim, you alluded to it a little bit earlier when you talked about talking to Dale Romans. Alert people because it's a lot of fun, part of the Horse Racing Radio Network. You and Dale are doing a segment now with them. When can people find that?
Well, it's on Saturdays. Every Saturday is part of their show that begins at 8 a.m. Dale and I come on at 10:30, and we debate a few topics and have a lot of fun with it. And, anyone that doesn't know Dale doesn't know his dry sense of humor, and he's very opinionated, and we do have a heck of a lot of fun. And Mike Pennant and his crew down there do a great job. It's on Sirius Radio.
And there's also the HRR and the Horse Racing Radio Network. You can type that into Google, their website, and I'm sure all the shows are archived on there as well, and so you can check out past meetings of Tim and Dale. Saw Dale down at the Florida Derby weekend. Always fun to catch up.
And you people should all watch Seth's show every week. He does a great job.
I try. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tim, good luck.
Hey, Seth, good luck to you. Hopefully we're not out with cans in front of the OTB on Sunday looking for donations.
I'm with you there. Yeah, absolutely. And wish all of you a lot of good luck, too. Have fun. It's a couple of great days of racing. And if you have some good stories, let us know. Email us some of the nice hits you had over the weekend. We're wishing everybody good luck and as we progress not only through this weekend, but in through the Triple Crown as well. So, again, thanks for tuning in. The annual Capital OTB Kentucky Derby Seminar. Hopefully we gave you some good ideas. So good luck. We'll see you next time.